Hello and welcome to my Viva presentation for Assessment 2. My name is Pam Webb and I am a pre-service early childhood teacher, and I have chosen the mathematical concept of addition for children in Year 1. The Australian curriculum states that by the end of Year 1, children should be able to carry out basic addition and subtraction using counting strategies. So before I thought about planning my learning experiences, I looked at the sequence of progression for children to learn addition. So the first thing that children need to know is how to count. So they need to be able to do one-to-one correspondence. They need to be able to substitutise. They need to have some understanding of place value, and most importantly, they need to have some understanding of counting on. The second step is for children to have an understanding of adding 1 or adding 2 to numbers between 0 and 10. So children need to understand that if we add 1 to 1, altogether that's 2. If we add 1 to 4, altogether that is 5. Once they've mastered that skill or have an understanding of that skill, they can move on to the next level, which is when we combine two numbers. So first of all, we start off with small numbers that add up to 5, so say 2 and 3 or 4 and 1. And then we look at numbers that add up to 10, so 9 and 1, 8 and 2. And then once they have an understanding of that, we move on to 20. So we're looking at numbers that combine to altogether they add up to 20. So we're looking at 11 and 9, 13 and 7. So we need to allow children to have an adequate amount of time to get an understanding of each level. And then we can progress further. But for this assessment, I looked at those first three levels only. And children also need to be able to reflect on those levels and be guided onto further progression and extension. So the next thing I looked at is what pedagogical practice we as teachers need to employ to ensure that children are engaged in mathematics, which is so important. So one thing we need to do is we need to scaffold their learning so they are challenged and direct their thinking processes and develop positive dispositions such as curiosity and problem solving, cooperation and investigation, and there are many more. We also need to enhance positive proficiencies. So we want children to construct reasoning and problem solving and to develop a deep understanding, which then also leads to fluencies where they are able to clearly construct their thinking. So the last thing we need to do is to provide relevant and meaningful experiences which challenge their thinking, develop their reasoning, explore problem solving and lead to a deeper understanding and reasoning. And we also need for them to be able to communicate what they learn and how they learn it through dialogue, through discussion and through debate with their peers and with their teachers. So once we have all this knowledge, then we can move on to planning our experiences. So my first experience was a prior knowledge experience. So we need to know whether these children are able to count and are they able to count with some fluency and understanding. So my first experience, I used a basic counting song to actually engage the children called Five Little Fingers, where they need to actually start with 1, count on to 2, 3, 4 and 5 fingers. Then I actually used manipulatives to show a number of items, concrete items, so that the children could actually substitutise or count with one-to-one correspondence. and then place their hands behind their back and pull out the number of fingers that corresponds to the number of items. So for example, if there's 4 pebbles, they would put their hands behind the back and pull out 4 fingers, or they may want to do 2 and 2. They are then given the opportunity to revise their answer as well, so they can actually put their hands back behind their back and then revise their answer. So then we would move on to using Aboriginal clapping sticks, so where I would clap out a number of beats and the children would actually write down the number of beats that were played, and then I would actually allow the children to take turns in providing the beats for each other. This way we get an understanding of whether children, 1, can count, and 2, whether they can actually record that number as a written number. And then we would ask the children what other items they could gather and count within their own environment, just to promote some discussion and dialogue about counting. The second lesson would be built around this book called Who Sank the Boat. In Who Sank the Boat, there is an addition of 1 animal up until there are 5 animals within the boat. It's quite a funny, quirky sort of story, so hopefully it would engage the children's attention. Then we could role play that story with a number of children adding up to, if it's 5, it's 5, but we could actually go to 10. And then children would be invited to record that role play in a representation through drawing or through the written word, and through the use of numbers to show the actual story. The third lesson, we would go outside and use seesaws, and again we're looking at the addition of 1 or the addition of 2, and in this way the children are actually relating addition to a real life activity where they're adding children to the seesaw. We would record our problems that we solve on clipboards, so again the children are relating what they actually see to written numbers, and then those seesaws would remain in the environment so the children could further extend and try different scenarios and problem solve a little bit more. The fourth lesson plan would relate to the combination of 2 numbers. So in this way we would use a bingo barrel to select numbers, just random numbers, and the children would be then asked to combine the 2 numbers together and come up with an answer. And again the children would be invited to be responsible for getting their own numbers and recording those on to paper. The 5th lesson, the final lesson, would be a reflection on what we'd learnt so far. So we would look at the combining of 2 numbers using written sums or problems, and these problems would take the form of both numbers and visual representations using counters. So the children would have 2 options to how they reach a total. And then the children would be invited to work in pairs to solve these problems so they can get each other's perspectives, and then they would be asked if they want to actually create their own problems, which they can pass around and share with their peers. And in addition we would also use the Counting the Ladybirds program, which would be on iPads, and the beauty of this program is that it again reinforces counting and addition skills, but it also allows children to extend their own learning because there are different levels that they can use. So they are the lessons that we would provide. So it's a progression from counting to adding 1 or adding 2 to combining numbers. And again, if the children aren't understanding one step, then we would halt at that step, add more time, change and adapt and modify that particular experience so that the children have an opportunity to master that skill before they move on. Finally, we would have to assess the whole process, and we would do that through the use of interviews, questioning, written work such as the representation of Who Sank the Boat, and we would also use observations to decide whether the children have actually understood the concept of addition. And that's my presentation. Thank you.